On the morning of January 15th, 1947, a local resident walking with her young daughter discovered a body in a vacant lot in Limerick Park, Los Angeles. The corpse was clean, drained of blood, and surgically bisected at the waist. The victim was Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old New England native. She was the daughter of a bookkeeper, a survivor of severe childhood asthma, and one of thousands who traveled west chasing the post-war promise of a better life in Hollywood. The clinical nature of her death points to a specific level of violence. The autopsy revealed a post-mortem hemicorporectomy, a precise surgical procedure transecting the spine between the second and third vertebrae. Ligature marks on her wrists and ankles confirmed she had been bound while alive. These forensic facts present a psychological problem. When violence this extreme interrupts the mundane reality of a vacant neighborhood lot, it forces a choice. We either turn away from the horror, or we find a way to process it. The press took the lead in defining the tragedy. Reporters coined the moniker Black Dahlia, adapting a local nickname into a marketable character that mirrored the film noir aesthetic of the era. While the LAPD investigation faltered, local newspapers reached record circulation. For the Los Angeles Examiner, the murder became its second highest sales day in history, trailing only the announcement of the Allied victory in World War II. This reaction established a divide in how we consume the grotesque. One path turns the victim into a commodity to be sold for profit. The other seeks a space to express the existential dread such violence creates. The 50-year legacy of Elizabeth Short's murder maps the trajectory of this divide, leading from the 1940s media circus to a sanctuary in the modern extreme metal underground. In 1947, William Randolph Hearst's media empire weaponized the case to drive circulation. To the Los Angeles Examiner, the police investigation was a hurdle to clear in the race for a front-page scoop. Reporters lied to Elizabeth Short's grieving mother, claiming her daughter had won a beauty contest to extract personal details before revealing the murder. They then paid her travel expenses to Los Angeles, keeping her isolated from both the police and competing journalists. The killer exploited this media frenzy, mailing Short's gasoline-cleaned belongings, including her birth certificate and address book, directly to the newspaper editors. This created a direct channel between the murderer and the headlines, bypassing law enforcement to taunt the public. The media circus generated over 60 false confessions, diverting critical police resources. This chaos allowed viable suspects, including the medically trained Dr. George Hodel, to evade indictment, despite handwriting similarities to the killer's taunting letters. The 1947 press prioritized the profitability of the story over the integrity of the investigation, engaging in a destructive exploitation that helped ensure the case remained unsolved. 50 years later, in Waterford, Michigan, a new subculture adopted the tragedy as a cornerstone of its own identity, but for a different purpose. Vocalist Trevor Sternert and guitarist Brian Eshlein co-founded an extreme metal band, naming it the Black Dahlia Murder. Strenert's creative philosophy was rooted in the idea that horror and aggressive music provide a constructive outlet for anxiety. He viewed the genre as a release valve for the negative energy of the modern world. The band's sound, a blend of technical Swedish melodic precision and raw American death metal, was built to mirror the dark, visceral themes of the case through musical complexity, rather than tabloid headlines. Where the 1940s press used the story for cheap consumption, this subculture reclaimed the gothic horror of the case, creating a space for fans to process existential dread through music. The track "In Hell Is Where She Waits For Me" illustrates this artistic shift. The lyrics deconstruct the 1947 cold case, transforming it from a police file into a high-concept gothic narrative. The song's atmospheric opening places the listener at Elizabeth Short's rain-drenched funeral. It presents the scene from the perspective of the killer silently watching from the crowd, a narrative choice that demands the listener confront the tragedy directly. This approach uses technical musicality to explore a grisly subject. By channeling the horror through intricate arrangements and layered vocals, the band replaces the tabloid shock value with a focused, disciplined artistic execution. In this context, the Dahlia name serves as a muse for a subculture that finds meaning in shared aesthetic horror. It shifts the narrative focus from media exploitation to technical creative work. In 2022, the band faced its own crisis following the death of Trevor Sternert. His passing threatened to end the band's legacy and leave their story defined by a modern tragedy. The band chose to continue. Brian Eschbach moved to lead vocals, and the group released the album Servitude, a project dedicated to preserving the identity they had built together over 2 decades. This decision was met with an outpouring of community support from across the metal scene. It highlighted a subculture built on solidarity, where fans and musicians sustained one another through the loss of their creative leader and left behind an unsolved, commodified myth. Decades later, an extreme metal band took that same darkness and used it to forge a resilient community. When faced with its own loss, that community didn't fracture, it sustained them, proving that horror can be used to build a collective strength that survives the tragedy.